Ryan Young, DirectorSports.com. How would you explain your defensive scheme? How has it evolved over your time as a coach?
Yeah, I think it's constantly evolving. I mean, I think the game has changed. I think one of the things is as you go through it, we kind of took this system, at kind of the core of this system back when we were at the University of Missouri. So that's in the SEC. That's 10 years ago now. But it was designed with a single gap approach in terms of the defensive front. So allowing guys to play in the gaps as opposed to playing in the men. And what that produced was the opportunity for guys, again, in our defensive front to have production. We took that system out to the Pac-12 at Washington State, and saw similar outcomes and similar results that way. And then with that, the coverage schemes that are used behind it, a lot of it ties into the RPO that became so prevalent in college football, again, over the last decade. And so, marrying that up with that, again, single gap mindset in the front. And then adapted it, again, taking it out to the Big 12 at Oklahoma. And you're seeing a little bit less in the quarterback run game and more of the RPO. What used to be kind of teams would dabble in it, now it has a tendency to every single down of football has about 3 plays you got to defend, where it's a jet sweep action, the receiver's going downfield and they can hand off the football and the quarterback can carry it. So in any event, as I would describe it, again, a single gap approach, we use the term downhill. We want guys playing in the opponent's backfield. Have an opportunity for guys to be competitive in coverage, impede receivers' ability to run the route that is called. And so we wanted to put, as best we can, not cover grass, but instead cover men. So that's the back end approach. And ultimately, what we want is, the space and speed game that is college football, and obviously the same thing in the NFL. But to make sure that from a personnel standpoint, that we have the necessary speed to be very competitive that way, take away the space that so often offenses are trying to take advantage of.
Alex, Dan Greenspan with the Associated Press. One of the knocks on SC's defense the past few years has been that they've not been a group that tackles well. How do you fix tackling? How do you teach tackling?
Yeah, so much from a tackling standpoint. One of the things we try to harp, with our guys is, there's no such thing as a solo tackle. And that goes back to the strain element of things. That goes back to the, guys running the football, the gang tackle type of approach. Now, the truth be told, obviously there's opportunity for solo tackles. And so making sure, one, from a personnel standpoint, that you got the necessary speed to put yourself in a position to be playable on ball carriers as best you can before the play develops. As again, going back to that space and speed kind of quotient that you're always looking for. Space plus speed is a major advantage from an offensive standpoint. And so you're trying to eliminate those things. Can we put ourselves in a position from a schematic standpoint, personnel standpoint, and simply strain to the football that we have a chance to, before an opponent can get to max velocity, to give ourselves the best chance to get them on the ground. And then two, making sure that there's more bodies at the point of attack than simply one. And then the final phase of things is just that, being an elite tackle team. And our approach, I mean, a lot of people use the term rugby tackle or the phrase rugby tackle. We would be similar that way as we go into the actual specifics. But it's a critical element of things. Every down in football requires just that. An individual on the opposite side of the ball that's carrying the football has to go to the ground. So that's not extra credit to get the ball carrier on the ground. So that's something that's constant work. I don't know the deficiencies in the past, but obviously that's something that is a constant in defensive football.
Ryan Abraham, USCFootball.com. Alex, after the Bedlam game, how crazy was that 24 hours, and how difficult was that decision to actually get on the plane?
Yeah, no, I think I'm still not over the fact that we didn't win that game. We won a lot of games in our time at Oklahoma and loved our time there. But so I appreciate you bringing up one of the few that we lost. But in any event, no, anytime you have an opportunity to be a part of elite leadership, that's very rare in sport. It's not talked about enough. So often, whether it's a college head coach or coaches in general, kind of turn into characters in terms of how people kind of look at them. But when you see the inner workings, when you have an opportunity to be, I'll say it again, under elite leadership as an assistant coach, that's very rare in this business. To be under elite leadership at elite institutions, now all of a sudden is opportunities that you don't want to pass up. And so had a tremendous opportunity to work for Coach Riley at the University of Oklahoma, and a tremendous opportunity to work at another elite place in USC. So very excited to do that.
Hey Coach, Mark Hall, USC.com. Welcome back to Pac-12.
Thank you.
You've been in Pac-12, you've been in the SEC, you've been in Big 12. Thinking back, why has this conference kind of fallen back, so to speak, among the other major conferences?
Yeah, and I think you're referencing to the perception. Sometimes perception is reality. I think as much as anything, if you think about, okay, what makes elite football teams, elite programs, you're talking about obviously the personnel that's brought into each individual institution, how those players are developed, and then ultimately the product that comes with that. I don't have a specific answer that way. I mean, the consistency as I've gone through what I think every Power 5 conference at this point, other than the ACC, is more commonality than maybe people think. However, I think as you look at NFL draft picks, there's obviously some measurables you can look at to see the talent level at certain places specifically, and in certain conferences holistically. But I think that's something from a developmental standpoint. I think that's the chief thing that you got to continue to look at. And again, you're talking to a coach, so it's very specific to that. Is how you develop the student athletes. How do you develop them to be bigger, faster, stronger, more explosive? It's one thing to bring them into your program. I like to think on the western half of the United States. I don't think that all of a sudden there's not the body types or the high school coaching that doesn't produce guys that have the ability to be high-level football players. Again, being in the conference, I've seen it, and so I think for us, as much as it's bringing in the right guys, I think that the thing that we constantly look at, and one of the things we got to focus on is it's the development piece, is making sure that we're real honest from a developmental standpoint. One of the things we use is combine standards. What does the NFL say is important for the individuals that they bring into that level? What's not Coach Grinch's opinion, Coach Wiley in our weight room, and this is something that we used at our last place, was making, again, the guys in the room very aware of what it takes to play at that level. Again, the best high school players play at ours, the best players at our level play it in the NFL. And so really putting that in the guy's face and making sure that everything that we do from a program standpoint is to develop those individuals. And so that's the challenge for us. And again, I believe that there's individuals out west here that certainly can play at that level. Yeah, I think it's just establishing a standard across an organization, and maybe sometimes too is what is an offensive guy or defensive guy, but in college football, as in this era of college football, there's a tendency to the best offensive coach is obviously going to be the best head coach, and I'm revealing a little bit of sensitivity as a defensive coach when I say that, but what is so critical to an organization from a success standpoint is having a standard within the walls, a standard from a development standpoint, a standard from an academic standpoint, a standard by how people live their lives, and ultimately holding a group to that, and then competing at a high level each and every Saturday. And then so what to me is so rare is not necessarily that an individual is able to call a good game offensively and ends up finding a role as a head football coach. But okay, in that role as a head football coach, what's their success rate? And I think you're talking about an individual won about 85% of his games. I say about. I think that's an exact figure. And as produced individuals on both sides of the football. And again, we use that term a lot around here in terms of a standard, and having a standard for how we compete, how we live, how we do everything that we do, both from a staff standpoint and as the student athletes under his lead. But it's hard to give you, an accurate description without being in these walls on a day in and day out basis. And also, when you talk about leadership, it's not on your best days. It's sometimes on those worst days, and I'm speaking more from a player standpoint, maybe even more so from a coaching standpoint, is having those guys in a leadership role that is going to be, have the players back and be in a position to be a mentor to them. As an assistant coach, you recognize that ability in a head coach.
Ready, two more, do Antonio.
Hey, Alex, Antonio from the Antonio Morales from the Athletic. What were those early conversations like with Dante Williams, and what went into the process of bringing him?
Yeah, I think when it comes to taking a new job at a new place, and from a staffing standpoint, obviously it's top down from the athletic department to the head coach and on down from there. And really what you're charged in doing is making sure that you've got the best individuals within those walls that also can develop the camaraderie and a true staff to put yourself in the best situation to be successful as a program. Some of that includes those individuals that you've worked with in the past. And obviously I think we got a good mix that way, big picture wise, specific to Coach Dante. Was a guy that an individual that we've known over the course of time. Obviously, you get a respect factor for several guys as you're in the business long enough. Guys either that you've competed against on the field, competed against from a recruiting standpoint. All that stuff ties into it. And then most importantly is having the conversation, can this be a good fit for your program? And so, you have those conversations as you look to not just build a staff, but ultimately enhance a staff, especially from the situation that we found ourselves in, come from Oklahoma. It's, okay, do you do same as? Okay, well, in so many ways, yes. And then in other ways, you say, okay, how can we enhance it? You mentioned Coach Williams. I'll mention Sean Nua from the University of Michigan joining us, and there's several others in other capacities as you go through it. But having the opportunity to visit and kind of share our vision for who we want to be, what we want to be. Are there advantages that sometimes having an individual that's been a part of the program, only if they're good enough? To just give us the inner workings of USC football in the past, that has zero to do with him being a part of our current staff. I think he's an elite coach. I think he's an elite recruiter. Oh, by the way, I think he's a good person. The guy I'm thrilled to work with, and I mentioned him. I mentioned Coach Newell, Coach Odom as our linebackers coach who was with us. Coach Manning as well, an elite staff, and very fortunate to have all those guys.
We're actually going to end on that one, so we have our next coach here ready to go. But thank you so much.
All right, thank you all.